Welcome to the Traveling Professors. I'm Professor Bob.
And I'm Professor Sheri.
And together we are
the Traveling Professors.
Welcome to show number 110 of the Traveling Professors. Today, Sheri and I are going to be taking you on a walking tour of the Galleria dell'Accademia di Firenze, or the Gallery of the Academy of Florence, which is noted, of course, for its Michelangelos, in particular the David, but it also has a lot of other art as well. Then we'll be stopping by the Museum of Minerals, which shows some of the items that the Medici had in their households. Now on our map, it's a pretty short walk from where we were the last time at the Church of San Marco. So here's the Church of San Marco, and we just simply walk very shortly down the street here to this building, which is known as the Academy of Florence, which houses all sorts of different things. Now here's a view of it from the exterior. It's a very unassuming entrance. Now some people have warned us that, there's not a lot of art here, and it is much, much smaller than the Uffizi, but it has the David, and it's worth seeing. But I've had people say, it really wasn't worth the price of admission just to see the David. Well, they're wrong, but that's okay. However, remember, we have that Firenze ticket for all the museums in the city. So it didn't make any difference if we were in there for 10 minutes or 10 hours. It was still free to us. Now, today, if you want to go and visit it, the tickets actually cost a little less than $15 unless it's on the weekend. Now, the museum itself was started in 1874 by Pietro Leopoldo, who was the Grand Duke of Tuscany. And eventually, it housed the David. Now, you remember that the David was carved in the 1500s, and it sat outside in the Palazzo della Signora, and it stood there until 1873. So it had been out in all of the elements. So they brought it in to this museum for some restoration, and it stayed. There are several other works of his, unfinished works, and a variety of other art as well. In 2001, musical instruments were purchased by the Florence Conservatory that were made by Stradivarius, Nicola Amanti, and Bartolomeo Cristofori, and they are also housed in this building. And there's some other paintings that have been added over the years, but most people come in to see, of course, the David. And so here's a view looking down the street with the people lined up. Now, what we had to do, we had to go across the street to where you normally buy the tickets, and they gave you we showed our card, and then they gave us a little ticket. And where the line is standing, we just simply walked right past them into the building. Now we come to some of the early art. Now, this museum in 2016 had 1.46 million visitors. Only the Uffizi had more in Florence. So here you see this statue. This is done by Giambellone, his full-size plaster model of the rape of the Sabine women. And one of the things that I'm going to do here is, since we had plenty of time and plenty of room, I did a 360 degree around them so you could see them from all different angles. And this building just swallowed people up, so that wasn't really much of a problem. And there was other art on the wall, but Sheri and I were interested in the statues. Then you turn and look down the hallway, which is the Hall of the Prisoners, is what they call it. And you see at the end, you see the David. But we need to look at the works of art on either side. They're known as the prisoners. And they were originally intended to be part of Pope Julius II's tomb. And of course, when that ended, and he never completed it, these were just left in the workplace. And after his death, one of his relatives found them, and the Medici took them and put them in the Boboli Garden grottos. And I've actually read some material where they talk about how this shows Michelangelo he's trying to get something different. No, they just weren't finished for the tomb, and that's the way he left them. It's just scrap as far as he was concerned. And then they moved them to the Boboli Gardens. So we go a little further down here, and here's our first one. And this is a frontal view of St. Matthew. And then you see the view of him from one side and a view of him from the other. And we find that this is one of the first prisoners. This is known as the youthful slave, or the young slave. And these run anywhere from 9 feet in height to about 8.5 feet in height. And then here's a view of the left and the right side of him. So you can see if they were in a grotto, you would not notice this as much. This one is known as the Awakening Slave. It is 8 3/4 feet in height. And the right and left views, you can see this one there's quite a bit of stone left to be removed from this. Here we have the Bearded Captive. This one is a little more complete. The Bearded Captive, almost 3/4 in height. Here's the view to the left-hand side, to the right-hand side. You can see how this one was probably a little closer to being finished. And then this one is known as Atlas. And Atlas is 9 feet tall. And here's the view of Atlas from either side. And I was able to get the backside of it pretty decently as well. Now later on, this was added. This is known as the Pietà of Palestrina. And it's a little controversial because some art historians don't believe it's attributed to Michelangelo. It was discovered in the Berberini Chapel in Palestrina in 1939. And then here's a view of it from either side, a little more extensive. And now we're ready to get a little closer to the main event, which is our friend, the David. And you notice that with the size of the people compared to the statue, it'll become even more noticeable since he is 17 feet tall. You're looking at one of the greatest works of sculpture art in the world. This is a signature piece by Michelangelo, and a lot of art historians believe that this work, along with Leonardo da Vinci's The Last Supper, The Virgin and Child, St. Anne, and the Mona Lisa, began what is known as the High Renaissance. This statue is 17 feet tall, and it's 6 feet wide at the base. And we're going to go around it like I did with the other statues. I want to give you a little background, but let's stay with this view that we're familiar with. Now, originally, this was done in September the 8th, 1504, and it was placed in the Palazzo del Signoria, right in front of the main Medici home. And it remained there, as I said before, till 1873 when it was moved to the Accademia. In 1910, a replica was then placed where the original was located. So when you go to Florence and you see that palazzo, you'll see where the original statue was located. Now, this is a little sensitive. In 1966, when they had the Great Flood, and I have to be careful because he's a little ticklish, the water of the flood came up to right across here, mid-thigh. So it's an oily, gummy liquid that was covered. So he had to get a little cleaning job. So he looks pretty good at this particular time. Now, this statue was originally known to everybody in the art world in Florence as the Giant. It was an 18-foot-high statue and it weighed tons of unflawed Carrara marble. And it had been badly blocked out and abandoned by an earlier sculptor named Agostino de Duccio. And then this piece of stone laid in the cathedral's workyard for 35 years. And it was a reminder to young sculptors of the challenge of their craft. Ultimately, the local gonfaloniere, Pietro Soderini, thought about giving it to Leonardo da Vinci, and he didn't want it, and then proposed presenting it to Andrea Sansovino, an excellent sculptor, but he eventually turned it down. So Michelangelo had at least 12 years of experience with this giant piece of stone, and ultimately he wins the right to do the stone because they liked his model, his idea, which was the local cathedral board and the union or the guild for stonemasons. And he signed his contract, and his contract was for a guarantee of 6 gold florins a month for 2 years. And the project that he was working on, which was a set of saints for somebody else, he set that one aside and began work. And he started on September the 13th, 1501. So it took him a couple of years to do that, actually a year and so beyond his contract. I would assume they continued paying him. And we end up with this spectacular stone monument, which was originally intended to go into the Duomo, into the church. So now when we get to the back side, you don't usually get to see this. You have to notice that Michelangelo's David has buns of steel too. Look at the muscular nature of this stone. Just incredible. Here's another view coming around to the other side. And to see this with the dome lighting on it is just spectacular. And then here's our final shot of him as we're coming back around to the front. It shows him poised at his moment of getting ready to take action against Goliath. Now, if you look at this, you have the weight of the stone, and it's basically being held in place by this one leg and part of a foot. So here's a close-up of the foot. You know, if you don't get your math right on this, you get a snapped leg David, and that's the end of him. And then here's a view of the crowd around the front. Not a lot of people went around the back side of it, but I've done that frequently. The Venus de Milo, you can go all the way around the Venus de Milo. So many people take a picture from the front, don't have to worry about Getty or Alamy having the back picture charge you for it. And then we left and headed to our next stop, which is the Mineral Museum. Well, after leaving the Academia, we went down the street past a museum we'll see later, the Archaeology Museum, and stopped at this relatively small little museum called the Mineral Museum. So here is the entrance to the Mineral Museum, and then you go inside, and all these furnishings are made out of semi-precious stones and stones from all over the place that have been sometimes in the Medici collection and sometimes in other people's collections. So look at this incredible fireplace with the stone inlay. And the Medicis particularly like these tables that are set with different minerals and stones. Then here we have two other works of art. Again, you can see the lapis lazuli and the blue and all the other different stones. And then this is, although it's square and on the wall, it was really part of a table. They just did not have the base for it. And then here we have this object in its center stand. And then here's a close-up, the woman in the middle of it. Then we have this very large vase. So it was quite an interesting museum. Now at this point, we should have just simply gone back to our apartment that we were staying at with the nuns, but we couldn't take the allure of the Duomo, so we headed off to first the baptistry and then to the main church. So that's where we'll be heading next time we're in Florence. Sheri and I hope you enjoyed the tour. Please come by our YouTube channel at Bob Packett, and please subscribe and leave some comments. Thank you very much. I've been doing podcasting on history for over 15 years. I've got over 4,000 shows, and I've done CDs, which of course can be sent out as USBs. So if you would really like to get more on history for free, then come by my website, as you see here, historyaccordingtobob.com, and see what's there. So thank you very much again.